Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Santa Maria School Board meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Start off with a roll call.
Ms. Sarah Turner,
Present.
Ms. Alvariano,
Present.
Ms. Sydney Lopez,
Present.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval,
Present.
Mr. Neil Patel is not present.
Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wait, so we're supposed to start opening at 5:30? I thought we were going to start. Okay,
Yeah.
be done by 5:30. 5:30. Oh, okay. All right. I was like, wait. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the board agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor,
Aye.
motion 4-0.
Okay, today in closed session, we have public employee performance evaluation, government code section 54957, 2.2, conference with labor negotiators under section 54957.6. Any public comments regarding closed session items?
We do not.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn to closed session?
Motion to adjourn to closed session.
Second.
All those in favor,
Aye.
motion 4-0.
Okay, see everybody afterwards. Okay, good afternoon. We're going to reconvene back into open session. During closed session, there was nothing voted on, so there's nothing to report on. We're going to move on to approval of the consent agenda for items 5.1 to 5.2. Can I please get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion 4-0.
Okay, we're going to move on to reports and correspondence. Start off 6.1 with the superintendent's cabinet.
I don't think anyone has any updates because we're going to hop right into our workshop.
Okay, moving on to the board and the superintendent. Start off with Ms. Sarah Turner, if there's anything to, yeah.
Nothing to report.
Ms. Alvariano, is there anything to?
The only thing is that I went to the curriculum council and it was a really fabulous council meeting. So thank you to Becky that she facilitated, and she always does an awesome job. Always. Thank you.
I know I'm gonna mess up the name. I'm like, where's my notes? I don't have them. But on Monday I attended the workshops that are being put back on by Monterey County, and it was communication, how to communicate between your governing board, the public, superintendent, and I believe there was something else. I can't remember the exact time, but anyways, it was a really good workshop. And I think that it'll be really good, like if you guys look into it, because I know you guys have been doing this for a long time. You guys are professionals, but I feel that there are some people there that said, they've been in the school, either as trustees or, in the education system for over 20 years, but it was such a good presentation by Lozano Smith, and they, reminders, because I learned a lot of stuff. I was like, I could get in trouble for that. Like, like you do not know, like sample, like social media, right? And if I like Sarah's post, they could be like, why are you liking Sarah's post? Like, so there's a lot of things that I think it would be like super beneficial for even you guys that have been doing it a while, just as a reminder of like, hey, these things could, perception, right? Perception. So yeah, but other than that, I don't have anything much to report, just that. And they are going to be putting up, they're going to be putting them back out. I believe the next one is February 23rd, I believe they said. So.
Perfect. No, that is a good reminder, because I think sometimes when I take it, it's a good refresher course. I don't have anything to report out as well. Superintendent Elman?
I have nothing to report. We'll jump right into our workshop.
Okay. Is there any public comments before?
There are not.
No, okay. Perfect. Thank you. So we'll jump in.
All right.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so we've got our mid-year student data workshop, and we've got some information from our chick survey, so just some overall school climate data for our students, and then Becky is going to do a really deep dive into some of our assessment data and some program data that's coming out. So I'm going to hand it to her. She's got it.
And just so you see in front of you, you have a copy of the presentation, also some sticky notes and pens so that if you have questions or thoughts, you can jot them down. We'll have some pause points, but we'll try and get through certain sections and then leave some pause for questions or any discussion, and then continue so that the content flows. And if there's something urgent, like I just don't know what you're talking about, jump in because it's just us. Okay, Summer's going to begin with our California Healthy Kids report.
I'm going to close this because it's going to distract me overall. So I just want to start off with saying that our California Healthy Kids report for 25-26 is available on our website, the full reports. I did not print them because it's a lot of paper, but it's there for our community to access as well. And it's under the family engagement section of our website. Those are there as well. The California Healthy Kids survey is given annually. We administer the survey for 3rd through 8th grade students, as well as all parents within the district and all staff within the district as well. So we had a total of 670 students surveyed this year between 3rd and 5th grade. And you can kind of see that breakdown as well 670 elementary school students surveyed. So that's 3rd through 5th grade. And then you can see the breakdown for our 6th through 8th graders as well. The reason that it's a little bit different is in 3rd through 5th grade, parent consent is given for them to take the survey. And in 6th through 8th grade, it's reverse consent. Basically, if you don't send it back, students can take the survey. So the numbers will vary just a little bit. We give the core modules as well as the supplemental modules that you'll see up there. So we give a behavioral health module, a safety and violence module, as well as the school climate module. And the reason that that's important is that those modules measure things like school boredom, drug, alcohol, and tobacco usage, and some of the other areas that we're really focused on in the services we're providing. So these are some of the key indicators that we focus on within there. Again, looking at school connectedness, as you know, I've shared a lot this year around our focus on student belonging, and that's been a core aspect of what we've worked on within our restorative practice team and at our campuses, and that's based on last year's California Healthy Kids Survey results. We look at academic motivation. The reason we're doing anything that has to do with school climate is really to make sure that our students can engage in the learning that's there on their campuses. We're looking for caring and trusting adults and that relationship that students have with them as well as what do parents and students perceive around the expectations that are set forth for their child in that learning. So when we talked to our students and got that student data back, here's some of kind of the key results that we saw. So we saw in areas of strengths that our students feel safe at school. 82% of our students reported feeling safe or very safe at school. 81% feel that traveling to and from school, kind of that route. And the reason that that's important is, again, we are responsible from doorstep to doorstep. So we want to make sure that that route feels good to our kids as well. 76% of our students reported a strong anti-bullying atmosphere or climate within the school itself. And 97% recognize that smoking, vaping, marijuana, or tobacco is not a good choice and unhealthy for them, which is great news for all of us. Some of the areas that we'll continue to focus on, 44% of our students noted that they experienced some kind of physical aggression. 46% experienced mean rumors or jokes happening about them. 28% of students reported cyberbullying and 17% reported feeling frequently sad. Those numbers are better, that we've improved this year overall. So, but we definitely gives us information about where we need to focus and continue that focus. So based on our student surveys, some of our key recommendation is to continue to strengthen our bullying prevention program. And I've worked with and shared this data with our Harmony at Home bullying prevention coaches as well. Enhancing our mental health support. We have an extensive mental health team. I'm always just highly impressed when I talk to much larger districts who have less than we do. So, I mean, our comprehensive support is really strong, and we've added now an additional realm with Daybreak Health, but we need more. So we'll, that's one of our focus areas. And then really working with our staff at all of our sites to maintain that positive environment for our students so that they feel that they belong there and that there's connections to those meaningful adults. Sure. So that's the elementary. We'll move on to the middle school, and then we'll look at staff and parent and staff.
Yeah, the part that was kind of alarming just kind of reminded me of going to school is 44% experience physical aggression or
Yeah.
rumors. But I remember going to school. I mean,
yeah,
school can be tough, and I'm just
It is.
thinking like, it's
And it's interesting because if you look at that compared to kind of students feeling safe and kind of this environment of anti-bullying. So it's, it's a little bit of both. When I look at that data, part of what it tells me is that that's not an ongoing problem, so that there's an experience with it, but it's not something that's pervasive, right? So overall, we're feeling safe, but these things still happen, which we don't want it to happen at all. But when I balance those out, I'm like, okay, this is that we have to look at it in both places.
okay. I see what you're saying as far as if they've ever experienced it in general.
In general,
Even
but-
if it was a one time during the school year.
Right.
It's still a high number, but
It is. It's a high number, but it tells me that when I look at the other pieces, it says like in general, we feel safe here. I mean, a large percentage of students feel safe. They feel like there's kind of this environment of anti-bullying. However, like these things still occur.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what caught my mind too. Caught my eye, but I think it's like super important to see. Of course, I would want to see this number lower, right?
Yeah.
But the sadness report, like that actually makes me happy to know that like our
Better,
kids
much
are exactly reporting, not reporting that sense of like sadness and stuff like that. Do you think we would be able to like for future maybe have like a comparison of like let's say this year's and next 2026 2027 that way we could kind of see side by side like hey this is how they were
Yeah.
at, and now this is what we're reporting and like see the trend of
Yeah. And there's a ton, like you'll see when you look at them online, there's a ton. You will hear some of that when Becky does her LCAP report because we use these as metrics within our LCAP as well. So when Becky does her LCAP, her mid-year report to you next board meeting in February, you're going to see like where we were at and where we are. So we picked some of these key indicators.
perfect.
So you'll
Awesome.
get some of
Okay.
it there.
Cool,
Mhm.
thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any?
What I'd be interested in terms of the students reporting sadness, I was in an extremely negative situation most of elementary and middle school. There's not much that could have been like you couldn't have made my mother well.
Right.
Like you didn't have the
Exactly.
capacity.
Yeah.
What I'd be interested in is, are we giving coping skills to students who are in a situation that we can't change?
Right.
Or how are we treating people who there is something that we can impact in terms of helping the family get access to food if they might need it? Or, so it's sort of, there's two roads to me. Like there's we can change the situation, we can, or we can just help you deal with the situation as best as you can, because sometimes we need to acknowledge that the sadness is legitimate,
Right.
and it's not something that's going to be fixable by us. The only thing that we can do is be as supportive as we can.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I met with our mental health team today, and for me, what's important is that a student is sad and they know there's someone to go to, right? They know they can go to the liaisons and get food if they're worried about that. They know that they can go to the mental health team to get some support. They know that they can go to a caring teacher, because you're absolutely right. Like, we're not going to mitigate all the challenges that our kids face every day. But my goal is always that where the challenge lies, there's a resource available. And so that's oftentimes kind of making that connection.
Summer, I'm thinking it might be nice if we, and partly because of how much work our mental health team is put into changing and expanding their programming, it might be nice to, if you've got some representatives come in, what are the different services, right? So like for the different needs for students, just to kind of share out some of that good work that they're putting
Yeah,
in place.
and we have a document I can share with you as well at our meeting, which is just a full scope and sequence of all of those supports we have and what they all do. And we use that for mapping and making decisions about where students can go. So yeah, we can definitely share that. The other part I was going to say is we're constantly using this data to make additional decisions. So starting this week, yesterday, Chelsea, who's our alternative to suspension teacher, Haley, who's our restorative practice TOSA, and then Amy Choate, who's our TOSA for after school programs, but also just finished her counseling degree. So I use her for all kinds of things also. But we were able to bridge two of my worlds. So I teach a 500 class for CSUMB, which is school psychologists. And so for their field learning, I assign them to us. So I have 15 second year school psychologists who are coming on to at McKinnon, La Jolla, and Santa Rita to do SEL lessons twice a week within classrooms. We had teachers kind of sign up, as well as like tier 2 for some of those students that are here. So they'll be here. They started on Tuesday with planning. And the reason that I mentioned those other folks is that they're serving for mentors for them. So I'm not mixing my worlds. So La Jolla is being led by Amy, Chelsea's leading the McKinnon team, and then Haley's leading the Santa Rita team. And so they met, they started planning. They really looked at these pieces of data to see like, where should we be focusing our attention during these SEL lessons? And so tomorrow they go and do classroom observations, meet the teachers, meet the students, and then starting the following week, every Tuesday and Thursday from 9 to 11, they'll be in classrooms providing additional support, which is a free resource to us that really helps kind of meet these goals as well. So I think, Sarah, you're so right. It's constantly about like what resources out there, what service can we provide, so that at least for the 9 to 12, or I guess 7 to 12 hours that kids are with us, we have something to give them.
Yeah, and I wanted us to think about, when we're doing goals, it's like 17% report frequent sadness. it could be that 25% report frequent sadness next year, and we're doing better services
Right.
because they're different
Because
kids.
the world is,
You know, and so just sort of sometimes the metrics that the state give us are
yeah, it's skewed.
Uh,
It's not a
it-
cohort.
it doesn't actually reflect the service you're providing. I want the children to be able to say honestly, like,
Yeah.
if you're sad, I want you to be able to put on the form that you're
Absolutely.
sad.
Absolutely.
I think it demonstrates though, the resources that we do have in place
Sure.
obviously are doing what they're supposed to
Yeah.
do, because definitely, yeah, I mean, Sarah's right, you know, like what matters is that we have that support for them. But, you know, the simple fact that we don't have a lot of kids,
Mm.
you know, sharing this, it
Yeah.
goes to show that these resources are very
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
And so, and Dr. Summer, you're incredible. I'm just like, right on what you're saying, I'm like, oh, that's so awesome.
No, no,
What
no.
did you not do?
I'm like, let me use both my worlds for good in here. So let's move on to the secondary report. Middle school's a different world. They take a few more assessments as well, partially just their capacity to be assessed, right? To sit through the assessment, but also just we want a little bit more information. We know that that's a really volatile period for kiddos, and so we want to make sure that we're getting that data early. It's important to note that we give our California Healthy Kids Survey a lot earlier than many districts do, and I'll give you my rationale for that. So we give it in October. When we give it in October, we usually get our results in before, like sometime in November around kind of that Thanksgiving break period. For me, what that does is allow me to work with the students who are responding to this survey. A lot of schools give it at the end of the year. And kind of like Sarah said, by the time you get the results and you dissect them, it's a new group of kiddos kind of thing, or they're in a new situation. By giving it early, we're able to respond within the period that the assessment was given. So if you look or talk to other places, they may be surprised that we give it so early. The state, in meeting with them, they're actually going to work on a recommendation to do an earlier assessment window so that you can respond. So here we look at a behavioral health model. So that's looking more at student mental health and trauma. We don't go in depth at the elementary level just because, again, I've shared with you, whenever we give that type of assessment, we want to make sure we have a response team available as well. We look at school climate models, which look at safety and discipline, school boredom. And then we look at this social emotional health, which is very similar to what we talked about. How are you feeling? How is that feeling impacting your learning? So in middle school, 69% of students in 6th grade reported that they feel connected overall. An important piece of information is that there's a decrease of about 54%. It doesn't mean that it goes down to like 14% or whatever that is. It's just in the based on response by 8th grade. So what that tells us is our students are coming in 6th grade feeling pretty connected still from that elementary model. And then by 8th grade, kind of that feeling of connection to school is starting to wane a little bit for them. And so when we're looking at a decrease of what's 69 minus 54, you know, a certain percentage there, that, I mean, it's not hugely significant, but it's significant enough that it's something I want to focus on. We saw this last year and the year before, or the year before last, with our 6th graders. Our 6th graders were kind of reporting this challenging transition to the middle school. And if you know, that's why we then cohorted those 6th graders together to start to give them kind of this period of transition that wasn't elementary, but wasn't 7 classes. And we saw our 6th graders improve. So that was a good decision. We saw an improvement based on the decision we made. Now it's kind of focusing on what's happening with that 40% of 8th graders that just aren't feeling connected overall. In academic motivation, 76% again of our 6th graders feel motivated to learn, and that drops again in 8th grade down to about 64%. So we're seeing a decline there as well, moving into 8th grade. And then feeling safe at school, 73% of our 6th graders feel safe at school, but by 8th grade, that's going down to 56%. So what it says to me is we did a really good job of addressing our 6th graders 2 years ago when we saw that they were really struggling transitioning to the middle school. And now we need to start talking about our 7th and 8th graders a little bit more, right? And kind of increasing some focus there on how do we maintain some of that with the structure that we have. But overall, our numbers look good compared to those states in both reading. Even in our declined areas, it looks, or our 8th graders looks good compared to state averages. So in that student well-being indicator, we saw for mental health a number a little bit higher, right? 19 to 21% of our middle schoolers experience some type of chronic sadness. And the part that's not looked at in elementary but is looked at in the middle school is that 69% have considered suicide within the past year. And that falls in line with what we see in our universal mental health screener. So that's not a surprise to us, but it is a decline. At the height of coming back from the pandemic, that number was much, much higher overall. Substance use rates are low. We saw 3 to 6% of our students reporting using alcohol or drugs and 1 to 2% reporting current vaping use. What I will say to you is that I don't feel like that's an accurate representation based on the reality of what we're seeing. We have a vaping epidemic across everywhere, not just in this district, across the world, I guess. I don't know if it's in the world, but definitely in our nation. And we're seeing that vaping epidemic come earlier and earlier. So we are partnered with Montage Health, and on Friday, there'll be a vaping workshop at McKinnon Elementary on February, and that's with Dr. Grover. So it was important to us. There's lots of kind of vaping workshops out there. But I don't know if Dr. Grover and his wife run the addiction clinic out of Montage Health. They're amazing, amazing people. And he's works really well with young people. And so he'll be coming into both middle schools and to McKinnon right now to do that vape workshop because they weren't necessarily super truthful here. Safety concerns, 30 to 33% experienced harassment or bullying, and 24 to 26% by grade level experienced cyberbullying. Again, not a number we would like to see. We'd like to see that lower, but it is better than previous years. And then on a positive note, we want to end on positive. We don't want to end on students being bullied and harassed. Between 66 and 73% report high life satisfaction, and they're optimistic, which is amazing because, again, kind of coming back from the pandemic, we saw those numbers much, much lower. So we see kids in that recovery phase, kind of, getting back. They're looking forward to things and looking forward to their future, especially in light of like a lot happening in our world right now. It's good to see this number. So moving forward with middle schoolers, we're really wanting to make sure we're engaging with our stakeholders, involving our students. They have a voice. They're old enough to have a voice in here. Our staff and our parents, in looking at these results and really talking through what does that look like for each individual. So as a student, what does it look like when you see these results? Comparing the data with our staff, and you'll see it right now, our staff and parent data to see where there's alignment. So where are students, staff, and parents kind of seeing the same thing? And where are we seeing student perception very different than the adults in the same space? And then addressing those targeted supports, that declining engagement from 6th grade to 8th grade, the mental health needs. I mean, like Sarah said, we could have 10 full-time people and I would still be coming to you saying it's not enough, but where can we utilize the resources we have for the best benefit? And then addressing those safety concerns around bullying and cyberbullying. That's the end of middle school. Any specific questions?
No, I think for me, just the drop off at 8th grade, I mean, it's a whole different
Yeah.
age range as well, because I
It
think you're kind of moving to high school level. So the challenges you're facing are bigger
Mm-hmm.
compared to when it's 6th grade. So I can
It
definitely see
is.
how that drop is.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's just, for me, it's really, I mean, when you look at, if you look at the report, there's tons of sub pieces of data in here that we'll start to use, especially that RP team and I, to start to kind of talk through like what can we do starting off the year with those 7th graders. We're not going to cohort them like we did with the 6th graders, but we need to create some opportunities for that connection. So yeah.
And I just think about just learning in general gets challenging when somebody's behind, but having to deal with like mental health, potentially bullying and everything else that kind of goes with it just adds an extra layer
Yeah.
of just your ability to catch up if you're
Yeah.
behind.
Yeah. And we did it outside of this, we did a series of empathy interviews the last couple of weeks with students. And it was really interesting as we kind of brought those interviews together and summarized all of the pieces. And, students talked about like, it's really hard to know the expectations of 6 teachers, right? Like what people want and what's expected of you, and kind of keep track of everything. And they really asked also for more support and like organization and planning. And I think that as they get older, there's more there's more independence expected of them. And I don't know that, one of the areas I think we can improve on is teaching them those skills really explicitly, because we kind of assume like you're an eighth grader now or you're a freshman now, like you have this. And I think that, especially through like our after school programming, some of those, we can bring in some of those resources to really help kids understand how to plan, how to stay organized, that I think will help them overall kind of stay engaged.
And I'm not sure if this is discussing, because I know there's a lot of programs we introduced within parent classes as far as just empathy from parents.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I mean, I hear parents be like, don't you understand?
Yeah.
You should
De las
do it.
pilas.
Yeah, de las pilas. And the kid's like, Mom, you don't understand. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going through this and it's tough. And,
Yeah. So I swear these aren't planned, but I met with our mental health team today. So we are partnering with the Parent Leadership Program. So I actually met with Chuck and his team. The Parent Leadership Program has 3 components to them. One is it's not called the Family Table or the Family Plate, but it's something like that. And it's 3 session workshops that actually we're going to partner with the food services team, and we're going to have them lead it, talking to parents around healthy eating. And it's about putting down your devices at the table. I should have brought them these cute cards, like discussion cards that you can have at the table. And it's really about connecting with your students. The other program is, I'm also going to draw something in caring, kind and caring. And we're going to be looking at our mental health team leading that with parents. And it's exactly what you just said. It's really about understanding where our students are developmentally, and then how do I support as a parent. And it's a short-term commitment. We know like 10-week programs are really hard for parents. So this is 4 sessions. They could do it either twice a week for 2 weeks or over a 4-week period. And so Ivan with that program came out and showed our mental health team today what it is, and then they're going to meet and kind of decide who's going to take the lead on holding some of those sessions. And then our ultimate goal for next year, and I've shared this with you before, is to train a cohort of parents in the program, because it's plug and play, but it's not, you don't plug it in, and have kind of a padres mentores model around this, where we're going to start to train our parents to lead other parents in there's 3 programs within the series. And so that's kind of what our hope is. Like, first of all, just to have a kind of a parent support group where parents can say like, mi hijo no está poniendo las pilas, right? Like he's not working that hard, and another parent can be there as that for them. And so our goal is to launch 1 session of each of those programs before the end of the year. So the Family Table one, Spanish and English, and then the kind and caring, don't quote me, I know that's not right, but something with caring program in Spanish and English before the end of the year. And then the counselors asked if they could do a series in the summer, kind of getting parents ready for next year. And we talked about focusing on those incoming 6th graders, just kind of so parents start off with that practice. So yes, we agree.
Don't know the possibilities of this, but I'm throwing it out there. We're not going to cohort the 7th and 8th graders together, but the cohorting of the 6th graders gave the 6th graders a feeling of connectedness, and it gave them an adult to immediately go to.
Yeah.
We could do something across 7th and 8th grade, doing things like creating like bigger groups of like future career interest. You're interested in technology, you're interested in medicine, you're interested in agriculture, that kind of thing, and have different teachers associated with that, field trips, times where those sort of like groups go together, and just the other things that we have that are create feelings of connectedness, like clubs or sports. Not everybody does that.
Right.
But something that is available to every 7th and 8th grader that becomes part of just a basics of how we do, so that when you come to school, it's like, oh, I'm in the technology cohort, or I'm in the medicine cohort, I'm in the education cohort, or the agriculture cohort, that kind of thing. And so that through it becomes that there's more point people for them and more feelings of connectedness. And somebody may have a completely different model than mine that has that area, but it's just something that I've seen other groups do, and be able to kind of, it didn't change what schedule you are, it didn't change what classes, but it changed your feeling of, oh, I'm belonging to this specific group.
We saw a little bit of an example of that, and it's been it was actually my goal this year, and I didn't even start it, so I probably shouldn't tell you that, but it's fall thing. But when we worked with Dr. Dominique Smith and we went to San Diego and we took those groups there, so one of the things that Dominique has in his school is it's a mentorship program, but everybody's assigned to a mentor. So every adult, it's not just teachers, custodian, front office staff, every adult in the school has, I think it's like 8 or 10 kids assigned to them. And once every 2 weeks they meet for a period of time, and once a month they meet for a longer period of time. And those kids stay with that mentor. For him, it's a high school. So those kids stay with that mentor from assuming the mentor stays, from 9th through 12th grade. And I think that's a very similar kind of model. And so we've had this goal of kind of establishing it. It's a little bit more challenging. He's a charter school and there's like a little bit more freedoms around that. But yeah, I agree. That we need to look into something for that group that's similar to that.
That you guys just, everything that you guys were saying, I was thinking like mentor, mentee, right? Even, and of course, parents, but even with our students, like this right here, like, yeah, we did this with the 6th graders, right? But what if we have a mentor, mentee with the students as well? So our older students, are able to show, the younger ones, like, this is how this is going to be on this grade, and this is how this teacher, and this, like, or like how Sarah said, if we end up, you're over here in technology, you're whatever, but I think that would be like something for both. The younger ones are looking up at someone, have someone to like, oh, okay, I know an 8th grader, I feel, like, oh, and I belong. And then the 8th grader feels that like, okay, I'm showing someone, I'm, learning all of that stuff. Because right now, when Jacob was saying that, it's so true, like with parents and having that, what you're planning, I'm excited for that, because I think a lot of parents sometimes don't know the reality of what kids have. And yes, they have high expectations, or they want this or whatever, but then children might be like, I need help. And of course we have resources, of course we have everywhere, but some parents might not know, or what, a lot of things, and those parents might not be able to help the student, and so all of this could grow into what we see. But I think all of those plans that we have in motion are like very good. But I would be very it would be like super fascinating for me to be able to see like a mentee mentor a program within our district for the students. Like,
and we've seen a little example of that with La Jolla. So La Jolla PE leadership class goes over to, JG's PE leadership class goes over to La Jolla, and the students lead the younger students in activities. And the La Jolla kids love it because sometimes it's their siblings or, that come over, and it gives those students kind of this feeling of, having a role and an expectation of them, which it works out because it's right across the street from each other. But I mean, that's a good model of how that can be successful. Yeah. So talking about parents. So 88% of our parents agree that the school promotes their involvement. Again, great number to see, excited to see that number. 95% of our parents are aware and are appreciative or strongly agree that our teachers are responsive to their children's social emotional needs, or it's more so that the school is responsive overall. 70% of our parents think that the school provides a supportive learning environment for their students. And 65% of parents agree or strongly agree that facilities are clean and well maintained. I want to caveat this one with, I didn't put it in here, but a lot of the responses were unknown, right? So it's not that the other percentages thinks that the facilities are bad. And you can, like I said, see on that report, it's more that they maybe said like, I don't spend time on the campuses overall.
How many parents were interviewed?
So the total number of parent responses were, oh, I had it on there and it wasn't there. It was a really big number. I think overall we had like 400 and some, odd parents respond. But again, remember, many of our parents have multiple students. So that's a number 460.
Oh, okay.
So what parents say is working well is communication. Parents feel like the school communicates well with them with what's happening at the school and information about their child. 89% of the parents feel that there is a caring adult and their student could identify who that caring adult was. That was echoed in our empathy interviews, which was I didn't expect. So I had a bias going into it, kind of that kids would say like, no, there's not, like, there's no adults that I can really connect with, just kind of based on previous. And almost every single one of our students said like, oh yeah, right away, this adult I connect with, or this is an adult I can go to. That was not our case at the empathy interviews last year. So that's a huge improvement.
Wow.
And even sometimes the adult they mentioned, I was like, really? Like there was a couple of times I was like, that's not like, and the interviews we did were not our easiest kids. We chose like kiddos that are having a really hard time, right? And so it really mirrored this. And I was like, that was really exciting for us to see. 89% of our parents feel that the school motivates their child to learn. And when we were looking at optimism overall, like their students' motivation and their students' optimism, they agree that their child is motivated to complete their schoolwork. Motivation doesn't mean ability necessarily, right? But we're seeing parents say like, yeah, my kiddos want to do it. And they agree that their child feels hopeful about the future, which if you remember from the previous, those connect. So our students are saying we're more hopeful and have a positive outlook for the future. And the parents are saying we see that our kids are more hopeful and have a positive outlook for the future. We had a total of, for staff, I think that was it's okay. It's okay. Okay, we'll talk about that. So 243 staff responded. I don't know how I thought that one. 243 staff responded to the survey, which is great. So we had 158 at the elementaries where we have more staff, and we had 85 at the middle schools.
So the little bubbles, how many didn't respond? Pretty much is on the little chart.
So this is just, yeah, no, it just kind of did it. That's just the graphic on there. So in our middle school of the teachers that are there, we have about 120 or so. And at the elementary, we have about 200.
Okay. Yeah. Because when I first saw it, I was like,
together, 200 and something, but this also can go out to staff. We ask them to send it out to all of their staff and not just leave it to their students overall. So if you think district-wide staff, we have almost 400. Which includes certificated and classified. We have about 190 certificated staff. So most of our certificated staff responded.
okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, because when you look at that at first, it's like,
Yeah, it's a bad graphic. No,
No.
yeah. No, that's a bad. It's not a true graphic on there. So what we saw from our staff is that 94% agree that the school cares about their student, which again, that goes with what we saw from students and it's what we saw from parents as well. They agree that the adults have high expectations. They agree that the school motivates students, and 89% agree that there's adequate help provided, that there's resources there. When we look at the staff environment, we saw 84% say that they work in supportive workplaces and supportive campuses. 90% feel that they help each other and that staff work collaboratively. 86% feel agree that staff feel responsible or responsibility for student and student learning. And 90% feel that staff collaborate regularly, which those are great numbers overall. And then just kind of get back real quick. That staff collegiality is important. It says that like on our campus, most of our staff feel like they have good working relationships with the other staff in their space. And they feel, yeah, and then school safety at the end there, staff and students feel safe, 92%. So again, we see a correlation between what parents are saying, what students are saying, and what staff are saying related to safety. So professional development, kind of the priorities based on what we saw from students and staff and parents, more support around trauma-informed and supporting students who have or are experiencing trauma, social emotional needs, kind of meeting the development. And it goes back to what Sarah was saying, is like sometimes our kids are going to come in really hard situations that aren't happy. And so how do I as a teacher continue to motivate students to learn in this reality that's there? And then we saw 46% saying classroom management. So we know that overall in this nation, we've heard teachers saying kids are harder to manage and we need support. And so that was reflected kind of in their response as well and their willingness to work on that through professional development. We know that if you go back to that student survey, we saw that, you know, there was kind of this higher level of depression. This is combining those both, as well as we saw students saying at that middle school level specifically, we saw that kind of higher level of depression and suicidal ideation, even though we saw it kind of smaller there. But our teachers are also reporting like we're seeing this increase of students coming in with these kind of depression or anxiety symptoms as well. And that the school emphasizes helping them, which again is what we want to see. We're not going to necessarily mitigate everybody coming in with a feeling, but we want to see that the adults in the space feel like there's a resource and a support for students. But no, that's the staff responses. So staffers in their staff survey are asked like, what are areas that you would like additional training or support in? So those are just based on staff response. Yeah. So what we look at when I'm looking at the data across the board, I'm looking at are students saying, are students reporting that they're coming in with trauma related behaviors kind of thing? Like as a student, am I coming in feeling sad or anxious? Do I have an instability at home? And I'm looking at the parents. When I'm looking at the parents, I'm looking at do I feel that the school can respond to my students' needs, especially related to mental health or anxiety or whatever those are? And then I'm looking at the staff survey to say, do they feel capable of addressing those needs as they come in? And then that's kind of how we're planning overall. Okay, so some of our recommendations and next step are to expand our counseling services to give more support to our teachers so that they don't feel like they have to handle every situation on their own. That's all I'll say about that. I'm always going to say expand counseling services. So staff wellness, 72, like, so we want to make sure that we continue to keep that number that's there. And also add to like, what are some of those self-care opportunities available to our students or to our staff, and how are we encouraging them to take advantage of it, right? So are we, I know when I was at MCOE, they would sometimes get on and make an announcement like it's break time, everybody get out and go for a walk, right? Like just kind of encouraging, like take that space that you need right now, because oftentimes as adults, we get stuck in where we are and we forget to take care of ourselves. So when we're thinking about staff wellness, like how do we help staff to take care of themselves as well? We're prioritizing trauma-informed PD, so that would be a series of offerings within our optional professional development, so that staff who are interested, who responded, for example, that they want more training, they would have that available to them. And then continue kind of those positive practices that are already in place for our students as well, or for our staff. I keep saying students, for our staff as well.
And
Let's go ahead.
Yeah.
what I would ask, especially in regards to self-care, and I really appreciated the presentation of the TOSAs, the last time we were here, was just making sure that the TOSAs, like, keep checking in with the teachers, like, what else do you need? How can I support you? There have been several different times in my career where somebody, like sometimes a principal, sometimes a TOSA was like, what's going on? And sometimes I would say like, hey, this part of the adopted curriculum's not working, or this does, like, I have these needs for my kids, blah, blah, blah. If someone who can come in and fix one of your work problems is the the best thing that has ever happened to you.
Yeah.
So it's like that, making your job just like a tiny bit easier. So just, I know our TOSAs are doing an amazing job, but just to tell them, hey, you guys are actually part of the mental health team
Yeah.
because you're making work workable for our staff.
Yeah, for sure. The last one I'll just say real quick is the community partnerships. We saw 59% agree, and I'm wondering why I missed it on here. You'll see it on there, but there's also, I think it's like another 26% that strongly agree, which I should have included in there for you for this. That our collaboration with organizations and our community partners has supported them as educators as well. And again, that's what we want to see. Like if we're bringing in building healthy communities, if we're bringing in Coach Al, if we're bringing in Harmony at Home, if we're bringing in all of these services, we want our teachers to see, or our staff to see, that it's for our students, but it's also to support them. And so that number, those are kind of the places I look. And so I was happy to see that number as well. That's the end of chicks. And while Jacob looks at that, I just want to remind everybody, the full surveys for the district surveys are on our website under student and family engagement or student family support. That's the district wide. And then each of the sites has their site specific as well. That's just for their sites. And so those are accessible to our community if anybody wants to look at those full reports.
All right, well, we're going to switch our focus to the academic side of the house. And we're going to begin by looking at our CASP, ELA and math, our English learner progress, and CAST 5th and 6th grade. Nope, 5th and 8th grade. That's a typo. I don't know how all three of us missed that. And just before I begin, this is data we haven't had a chance to look at yet. And at this point, it's very old. It's from last spring. So it's important that we take a moment to look at it, but know that we're getting ready to launch into test season again. In fact, our summative LPAC window begins next week. So it's time. So this is our overall ELA data for the SBAC assessment. On the far left, the long, tall rectangle gives us the picture of our district overview. And so we are performing in the yellow, increased this year or last year from the prior by over 11 points. So it's exciting to see that we're moving in the right direction after feeling some stagnancy and even some decline over the previous few years. And in all subgroups except one, we did see an increase as well, ranging from, is it 9 to, well, 32 points for our Filipino students. There's 36 of them, and they really raised the bar for us. Our students with disabilities maintained. So they increased 1.4 points. It's not enough to be considered an increase. This year, I know Melanie and her team have really focused on making sure that our students with disabilities are getting more targeted interventions, such as phonics for reading. And we do have a training actually tomorrow in this room for teachers to receive more feedback on how they're implementing that program. And so we're hoping that these types of interventions are going to help our students make even more progress at the spring of this year. Is there anything else you want to say about that? Okay, thanks.
So just really quick on the chart. So when it's on the low on the left, it says increase in points. That's taking the pretty much the average or all the data to get on the right side, right?
Yes,
So as a
it
whole,
is. So the data
district.
on the left is district-wide, everybody. And then each of those is by subgroup.
And then when it says it's increased by the points, essentially the year prior, or we were
Compared to the year
we
prior.
were potentially the year prior, the district would had more students that were below standard at a higher
Correct.
percentage. So it would have been like in the 65 or 60%.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's a huge, huge increase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this is looking at that data by school site. And again, just about every school site did improve in their met or exceeded percentage. Santa Rita improved slightly, I believe, and were considered at the maintained level. But again, we're really focusing this year on those literacy skills and targeted interventions. And so we're expecting to see growth.
How long have we had started the program at Santa Rita with the Mixteco tutors?
This is our second year.
Okay, so we're barely getting it going.
This is, yeah.
Barely,
The
barely,
first year
yeah.
was figuring it out.
Yeah, exactly. Not trying to, yeah, it usually takes by the second years when you catch your flow. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the year where I see like fluidity, continuity, everybody's in a rhythm. Last year we started kind of later in the year, so I would say it's really been like it was a year. At the end of this year it'll be. I would
This
count
is
this
the
year.
first year for the program at McKinnon.
This is the first year for the program at McKinnon. Yeah.
Okay. And it's kind of a side conversation. I know we kind of talked about, I guess doing a census of how many students we have. That
Yeah, so we now have Mixteco on our enrollment so that we
Okay.
can actually disaggregate that. And
Okay.
so we'll probably have even a better number when we do enrollment this year, the re-enrollment and verification.
Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. Thank you.
And this is just my feeling as an educator. Like when you're looking at this, these tests are really, really hard.
Mhm.
I always feel like the kids that are in the nearly met group are going to do okay in the next grade level. They have the academic capabilities to be successful and have access to the curriculum at the next level. It's the ones that in the not met
Yeah.
that really concern me, because that tells me you're exiting fourth, going to fifth, and you didn't really get enough of the fourth grade material to make fifth grade really accessible for you. So it's like those are the kids that concern me a lot more than the nearly met, because the nearly met, I feel like, you know what, you still have your feet under you, you're going to be okay, so it compounds
Yeah.
over time. But I always kind of am looking at the last bar rather than necessarily like the first bar when I'm thinking about kids.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that because that's also where we're looking. If they're at nearly met, they just need a little bit more instruction in one area or a little push. Another thing that came up recently when we were at Santa Rita for, was it learning walks, instructional rounds last week, is that just in the last 2 weeks, they've had at least 10 students exit and 10 new students come. And so they do have the highest rate of transiency and changing students out throughout the year, which impacts our year-to-year scores and even our beginning to middle to end of year scores for that site more than any other.
Can you repeat the first part you just said?
At least 10 students, it's probably up because every day I talk to Donna, it's more that since they left for winter break and then coming back, at least 10 students left the school, they moved away, and at least 10 others new to our school just moved in.
Oh.
And more of them are speaking Mixteco. So,
Yeah, and just in terms of our advocacy as a board and thinking about what we need to advocate for at the state level, it used to be that a child had to be in your school in October in order for their scores to count in in your favor or against you in April or May. And now a child walks in, you've never seen them, and they're taking the test that day, and you're responsible for that score, even though you had nothing to do with it. And I feel like that's really a step back in terms of accountability, because the other system to me made more sense. You had them at least 6 months to be accountable for something. And as she's saying, like, as if you have people in and out, teachers are doing the absolute best that they can, but you can't be responsible for what happened all the way up until they walked into your room.
so this is that same perspective, but now looking at math. And I'm really pleased to say that overall as a district and in every subgroup, we did increase. And so that's exciting news. And I'm going to share with you in a couple of slides what we're doing for math in particular this year that I think is going to continue to launch us forward. So the range here increased between 9 and 32, the Filipino students and our this time it's 37. But it's great to see again, like as a district, that I think the scope and sequence has probably been huge in helping that. I think the coaching support is really making a difference. I think there are a lot of good things happening to help our students improve in their learning. And then looking at that by school, and it's again the same story that all of our schools except for Santa Rita did increase. Santa Rita unfortunately declined slightly. But again, I'm going to talk to you in just a moment about the things that we're doing district-wide with math this year. Right, so improving math practices this school year. As I said, all of that data was from last spring. And so this year, we have had a really big focus on math and the way that we're implementing it. Our focus in the District Curriculum Council this year is preparing for the math adoption. And we haven't really had a chance to provide training around I'm going to say new, but it's like 2 or 3 years old now, mathematics framework for the state of California. And so we've been doing professional learning around that during our curriculum council meetings. So in the new framework, I'm going to call it new until next year. The focus is on conceptual understanding before procedural in the way that we teach math now. There's a lot of emphasis on using high quality instructional materials, and that's what we'll be looking at for adoption as we look to implement the updated version, not this next school year, but the following year, so that we can take the time to do a thorough adoption process. The mathematics framework also has a strong emphasis on equity and how we are providing access to all students, all of those subgroups within our school district that we serve. And Elva, you've been with us. I don't know if you want to add anything. You don't have to, but you've been a part of that.
Yes, and framework.
Your microphone's off.
The last curriculum meeting that we had was really interesting because Becky put up a problem, and it was a multiplication problem, and all of us had to
Mhm.
solve it. And there were some of us that didn't know how to do it or forgot.
Because we asked for 2 ways too.
Exactly,
Mhm.
the 2 ways, exactly.
I solved it one way.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand how the other people on my table were solving.
Right, right. And so there were 2 ways of solving it, and some of them, like Maggie,
Mhm.
got it really quick. I took time myself trying to do that. So it was trying to show the teachers and the principals that there were 2 ways of doing it, the old way and the new way, how to break it down. So that it would be, so the kids would know exactly what was going on with the problem and not just putting a problem out there and it be like the old process because they didn't know what was really going on.
Mhm.
So, and then we also had a handout where there were different topics that we were to discuss. Underline, well, question mark if we didn't understand it. But anyways, the different ways of how you interpret all of those examples. And I'll tell you, we got into a really good discussion when we all went to see what is going to be the best practice for the children, for the
Mhm.
kids, and the framework.
Mhm.
So it was
Yeah.
to me it was amazing, and focusing on the framework.
The framework and English learners was our focus. for most.
Exactly. And the English learners. And we talked about academic language, how important that was. Because I mean, you could take the state test and not know the language and stuff, but
Mhm.
it was, I'm excited that we are looking into this math because I know that we need to improve some more.
Mhm.
I mean, we've improved, but we need a little bit more.
We still have a
Yeah.
ways to go.
Yes,
So
I was gonna say thank you, Elva, for being part of it.
yeah.
yeah, it's really nice to have Elva with their teachers. Um, so we also have training each year at our new teacher orientation for our math curriculum, and we bring out a presenter from the curriculum to make sure they get the same training that our other teachers have received as since we've adopted it I think we're in our 4th year of implementation
Mhm.
with Eureka Squared. And then this year, some professional development we added is for leaders. And so we did cite Eureka Math Squared implementation walks for leaders is what the sessions are called at each school site. And so our success partner at Eureka Math, she comes out here from Colorado. That's where we're part of her region, and she loves getting the break from the cold weather this time of year. And she goes to the school with me. We walk with the site admin and the coach. The teachers that we visit know that we're going to be visiting them and have let us know what lesson they're going to be on, so that we're looking at how are they implementing the curriculum? Does it match the intention of the lesson? And what are some small tweaks we might want to make to make that lesson more effective. And so by diving into it at that very specific level where we're looking at, okay, they're in the introductory part of the lesson, and that should take 5 minutes, but they're spending 30 minutes on it. Are they going to be able to actually teach this lesson if they're not moving on at the right pace? Or, oh, they, guided students through this piece that is supposed to be independent so that you have some formative assessment kind of piece. And then the coaches, or the principals, they decided each site, are providing the feedback to the teachers. The teachers know that they're going to receive it. And then we're offering the coaching support to go with it, so that the coaches and the teachers can work together on improving the outcomes for students. And then on top of that, last week, our success partner was here to work specifically with the academic coaches. And so we looked deeper into the platform at the resources that are available to help teachers with understanding what the routines should look like. Because if you're implementing it correctly and you're using the routines, those are the same in multiple grades, in grade spans. And so students can focus on what am I learning, not how am I participating in this lesson. And so, or like, which concepts, how are they mapped from K through 8 or TK through 8? And so after spending some time in professional development around the materials for the coaches, then they had already identified a teacher they were going to work with, and the coaches are preparing to model a lesson in a classroom so that they get the experience. Not all of them have used this curriculum. They've been coaches for some time. So they're going to actually deliver a lesson at their school with a partner teacher. The partner teacher is going to sit and hear how they planned and what they're thinking. The teacher is going to observe and give them some feedback at the end. And then we're having a debrief session in February to talk about how that went and how the coaches are using that information to continue to partner with teachers for coaching. So it's really exciting. The coaches said it was one of the best trainings they've had. So
I'm not a teacher, but I think that is awesome because you mentioned something I think is very important. Everybody that's involved is aware. It's not a surprise, right? 'Cause
right,
from the
not
you-
a surprise.
Mhm. Here comes your admin and
And a team of
Yeah,
people.
like wait and stop in the lesson
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So I think that is super
And it's
like
meant to be a support,
Yes.
it's
Not
not
surprise,
evaluative.
yeah.
It's not about trying to catch somebody doing
Yeah.
something wrong. It's supposed to be helpful. And there's a tool that we're using when we're looking at the different aspects of each part of the lesson and what things teachers might be doing there. And that's used as a talking tool after the observation and with the teacher too, so that they can say, oh, let me look at this. If I'm doing this part of the lesson, then I should probably not be upstanding and directing. I should be walking around and monitoring and checking in with my students and asking them prompting questions rather than guiding the whole class, so that we're starting to transfer more ownership of the learning to students.
Just a really quick, I wasn't, okay, I don't remember hearing, maybe you could remind me. Are we going to be adopting the same, is it Eureka Math?
It's on the approved list. And what I've been told is that only a few lessons are changed because it was already written following the national math standards.
Right.
So it's a possibility, it's an option for our teachers, but we'll look at
So we
program
are
to make a
gonna-
decision.
We're going to see, because we've had Eureka Math now for almost 10 years, maybe?
We had Eureka Math from the previous adoption. And then when Donna was Director of Curriculum and Instruction is when the national version came out, Eureka Math Squared. And I didn't personally use Eureka Math, the previous version. I don't know a lot about it, but I hear that this version is much more user-friendly. So, but I know that we do have teachers who really like using it and others who would prefer to look at something else. And our due diligence is to look at what our options are.
I'm not aware of there being a lot else out there.
It's a long list, but I don't know. I haven't looked at them yet. I'm waiting for the SISC adoption toolkit to come out because I rely on those for adoption processes that I know will be thorough and get us something quality. So,
But teachers are gonna get to go look at them at the.
oh yeah, and we do have, that's something that we shared at the end of the curriculum council is MCOE is hosting a curriculum fair with the adopted materials. Yeah, so I gave the curriculum council members a sign up form if they want to be released for part of a day by a sub to go browse, or if they want to go after school for some paid time. We talked I was very forthcoming that they're going to be talking to vendors whose job is to sell them things and to talk about the bells and whistles. And so this fair is not going to be a contributing factor to our adoption process. It's just that we have the list of adopted programs by the State Board of Education and an opportunity to look at them if this team is interested in looking at them. Maybe get some swag. Oh, great.
North County is piloting right now. I'm not, but other people are. And after going through, they're piloting Eureka Math Squared and then they're piloting an iReady product.
Okay.
And that's the two that they chose from the
To
list.
narrow down. Okay. I'll be excited to hear how that goes.
With an adoption for next year? Sorry.
Yeah, the goal, I mean, North County has not had a math adoption. I'm not kidding, in 15 years.
Mhm.
So at the elementary level, they have at the middle school and the high school. So the elementary teachers in County are waiting with bated breath that if they can buy stuff for the fall, it would be amazing because we've not,
Mhm.
had a new product. Common Core came out in 2010,
Yes.
and what we're using is basically a product from then.
All right, I'm going to move us on to EL progress. And for this, I did pull 3 years of data, and you can see the key. And what stands out to me is there's very little change. Again, the 2025 test started in February of last year, so this is outdated data. We're about to start our new summative LPAC. But a significant change we've made over the last couple of years, and that is fully in effect this year, is adopting a curriculum for a designated ELD and implementing it kindergarten through 8th grade. And so the year before last is when we brought in the 4th through 8th grade because that was what was available. And that started later in that year. And then last year, K3 became available, but later in the year. And so this is the first year that all of our students are getting that guaranteed designated ELD time with a strong curriculum to support it. And in my visits to school sites, I've seen some great implementation. And so I'm hopeful that we're doing something important to help move the needle on this.
Do you know how many kids are leaving 8th grade still as ELLs, how many LTELs that were not getting redesignated before high school?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get it for you.
Okay.
I make a note. Okay. This last slide, I'm not going to talk a lot about. It's our California Science Test. Grades 5 and 8 are the 2 grades that the state has designated to take the science test. In grade 5, there's some slight improvement. In grade 8, a little bit more. And again, with all of the things that we're focusing on, we're still teaching science. I'm going to say we've been pushing the staff development and implementation harder with math, ELA, and ELD. And that's because you cannot do everything at once and do it all well.
Is the fifth grade science test still covering both the fourth and fifth grade science standards
I
or?
believe so.
Okay.
All right, that is all of the state testing data I'm going to talk about. I want to spend the rest of the time on dibbles and then next steps. We just barely touched on dibbles and looked at a couple high bird's eye view reports at our last meeting in the state of the district when we had several topics. So tonight I'm prepared to go deeper, and I do have some information to bring back from our conversations at the last meeting. So I want to start with the basics, which is, why did Curriculum Council adopt dibbles? And as many of you recall, there was legislation passed for school districts to adopt a State Board of Education approved reading difficulties screener, and implement it beginning this school year, the beginning of the year. And so I've linked, or it's not linked, but I put the source here in case anyone wants to dig into the FAQs from CDE. I've pulled a few points directly from them. But what CDE is saying that the purpose of this screener is a tool, one of many tools, as we talked about, to gain information about how students are learning, particularly in those foundational reading skills. And then to provide early intervention based on that data, particularly for students who are showing that they may experience difficulty learning to read, and closing the gap so that if we intervene early, catch those who will respond to that intervention and identify the ones who are not responding earlier, then we can provide additional and deeper levels of support sooner. So with the implementation of the difficulty screener, reading difficulty screener, CDE requires that districts must further evaluate needs and progress for students who are not where we want them to be. We need to identify supports for classroom instruction, provide targeted individual intervention. And by individual, it means individualized, whether that is a one-on-one or a small group of students. And then further diagnosis when needed after we have shown that we have provided some interventions and students are not responding. So really following that MTSS and response to intervention framework that Melanie and I have been collaborating a lot about for our district. And then, as we said at the last meeting, this is one piece of a bigger picture. And so our purpose with this is to inform instruction for individual students on very discrete foundational reading skills based on the science of reading. So our process for this adoption is that we did use the CISC, which is the California Superintendent's subgroup on Curriculum Improvement Support Committee. We used their toolkit last school year throughout the year to look at the state board approved programs. There were 4 that the State Board of Education approved. We eliminated one because it did not have a Spanish assessment, and we felt it was important for our district to have access to that. And so we did a thorough evaluation of the other 3 following the protocols in that toolkit. And then by the end of our review process, we did a 3 corners, not 4, because we looked at 3 programs, a 3 corners activity of which curriculum or which assessment tool the committee thought would be the most beneficial for our district and what they preferred. Essentially, right? That's what we get to. And the majority of our curriculum council was all lined up against this back wall because there was not enough room at the corner. And we had maybe 3 teachers who were over here. The majority was for M-Class Dibbles, and we had 3 who really liked HMH's Amira, which is an all-digital platform. In the end, with conversation, they said we can agree to do Dibbles. That's what the committee overwhelmingly recommends. And again, Elva was there. Did I miss anything? So it was Elva and 2 teachers. So then we made that decision in April. We brought this to the board for approval in May of last year. And then we had one more district curriculum council meeting for the year. And we spent that meeting focusing on questions about how are we going to train teachers to use it? What is implementation going to look like? And we made an agreement that we would implement it as intended K-6 because of our reading gaps in this district for 2 to 3 years before we made changes to it so that we can see is it effective or not. And so following that, going into this school year, we had training and development at our August and October PD day. With our adoption, we were given a 6-hour training and we decided to break it into 2 parts. So the first 3 hours was about how to administer, and that was before they administered the test. They did it on their first mandatory PD day. And then the follow-up on our October PD day was, you have data, now what do you do? So it made sense to do it in 2 chunks instead of throw 6 hours of PD at you and then you're brain dead and can't do anything with it. And then as another part of that onboarding contract, we had a training this week on Monday with our administrators to talk about, we have now beginning of year and middle of year data. What do we do as leaders to make sure that we're implementing this well? So during our training this week, because I had questions from our last meeting, I was able to get some of those answers. We had looked at some areas where we saw students, it looked like they digressed instead of achieved. But what we confirmed is that the benchmark goals move throughout the year. So iReady, when we're doing that, these are the standards for the year, and you're going to show how far you can get in this year's learning all at once, even though you haven't been taught it or had time in this grade. And in Dibbles, it's set so that the first benchmark has the lowest target and it increases for mid-year and then increases for end of year. So if it was letter naming fluency, at the beginning of the year, the benchmark might be 7 or 8. By mid-year, it's up to like 15 or 16. And by end of year, you need to know all of them in order to stay on track. And so when we see students who are below or well below at the beginning of year, that data is crucial for us to identify and immediately start providing those interventions in those areas for them. Because if they're already behind, it's going to be so hard to catch up as the targets move. So something that we really went over and highlighted in our training is, what are the tools for instruction? How would teachers progress monitor to see how students are responding to that? And how are we going to implement a system for school-wide monitoring for students who are in red? And when do we refer them to cost to the coordination of support services, of coordination of services team? Part of our MTSS system, when are we going to start monitoring them at that level to identify if we need to take additional steps? So with that, we're going to take a deeper look at the data, particularly for grades K through 2. We'll look at all of the measures for each of those grades. So before we start, the key is at the bottom of the page. And where we see the red and white stripes and also yellow and white stripes, that means the test was started. A student scored a number of the responses in a row wrong right at the beginning. They said the wrong letter 5 or 6 times, and the teacher has a set number in their training where they say, I'm discontinuing the test because I don't want to frustrate a child who doesn't know this. And so they stop the test at that point. So they're considered well below if it's that pink, but it shows us how many discontinued because they couldn't get that first 5 or 6. For the decoding and word reading,
Can we stop real quick?
yeah, I'll stop.
So let's go like, for example, letter sounds, right?
Yes,
So it has the pink on, let's say BOY. What does that stand for?
beginning of year.
Yeah, beginning here. Okay. Um, so it has that pink, but because it has a line through it, it means they discontinued the test because they were just kind of getting it.
They were unsuccessful.
Which course can be frustrated the student in some other cases. And then the next pink, the 21%, is they did continue it, but they're still well below, even though they got through the test as well.
Because they got some right to be able to continue.
Okay, and that only happens on the well below section, right? Because obviously somebody gets higher level, they're going to finish the whole rest. So,
Yes,
okay.
with one exception,
Okay.
and only for kindergarten. Do you see it in the right column, the decoding and word reading?
Decoding.
They have yellow with the stripes.
Yes.
That's because when we look at these 2 columns of measures or subtests, the measures on the left, letter names, phonemic awareness, letter sounds, those are skills that students may have been taught in preschool or even at home. If a parent reads to children and sings to them and does nursery rhymes, some parents teach their children the letter names, right? Or they go to preschool or daycare where those things are happening. They could come in and be, as you can see, like scoring highly. It's less likely that a child is going to come into kindergarten having practice decoding and word reading, where they're sounding out words. The top test is non-word fluency, and so it would be a 3-letter word that's not a real word, like g, og, gog, because you're testing, are they able to identify what's the letter sounds, hold them in their head, and put them together to say a word. And then word reading fluency is actual words, how many of them they're reading. And for kindergarten, it's typically consonant, vowel, consonant words that they're reading, to see how many they're reading in that measure, which is typically 1 minute. So they're starting at yellow because we wouldn't expect them to be, they're not considered well below or below for something they likely have not been exposed to. Does that make sense? The top measure is nonsense words. The bottom measure is real words, consonants, vowel, consonant. The top right is decoding nonsense words. And the bottom right is decoding real words.
If this ultimately ends up being a tool that teachers find helpful, great. I don't think this is giving us any data that serves what the original purpose of the legislation was, which was to identify students with reading disabilities that needed extra support.
I think about it differently. I was going to say what I would say to Summer. I'll push back on that. No,
No, it's fine.
yeah, as colleagues, because what it does once we dig into this and look at the student groupings and what's suggested for students, and then the lessons that go with that and the progress monitoring, you're identifying really discrete and specific skills that students need practice with. And when we look at the report, it tells you exactly these 2 students, this is the pattern that they seem to be missing. And so here are some activities to support that. And so I think we have not systematically yet implemented those mini lessons and progress monitoring. So that's our next really important step to see growth. For what we saw when we looked at who has done the progress monitoring, we saw that a few teachers tried it like immediately following that October PD, and it kind of dropped because we didn't really have it laid out as this is a system-wide protocol for what we're doing, especially if we're looking at students who are far below and we're going to bring them to cost so that we can show the intervention we provided and those measures of how they've been responding to that. So
I mean,
Just,
we'll
just to
definitely
let you
see.
know, my second grade class, and the different screener that North County is using, which I'm sure my second grade class looks very much like every other second grade class at Santa Rita, it doesn't have a lot of red.
Okay.
That it was very few of my students that were identified
Mhm.
by the screener as having particular difficulties, and the screener was very accurate
Okay.
in terms of who those kids
Mhm.
were that were very different
Yeah.
from their peers. And some of it we could then drill down into why is it giving them this color, and being able to figure out, you know what, this kid did all these other domains. It was a lack of vocabulary,
Mhm.
kind of thing. So it's the data looks really different. So I
different.
just want you to
Okay.
be aware that that's out there.
Yeah. The other thing I'll share that we've been kind of looking at as our iReady Diagnostic 2 is being completed. We're at 90% this morning, so I kind of did a quick check. What we're seeing on the iReady Diagnostic for the broader, like phonological awareness, is looking really close to what we're seeing here. And so that's interesting to me because that's saying, yes, this is an area we're going to put them on my path to address this, but it's not necessarily telling the teacher, these are the specific patterns within that domain that need to be focused on. And I think this is going to support the teachers with that because what iReady is giving is so broad and this is much narrower. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, like with anything.
I'm trying to, understand it and what Sarah brought up right now. I mean, I don't know, what the measure is, but what I'm hearing is probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but on this side, these individuals, these students, more than likely are going to be students that need the support with reading, correct? Because they
They're
Um,
beginning with some skills that, and with kindergarten, it's frequently they haven't been taught these skills yet, right? They're new, so we're going to teach them these skills and make sure they catch on to them and keep moving. If they don't, then they're going to be the kiddos who we feel are going to struggle with reading, and we're going to look at additional interventions.
So the way I'm trying to see
Right.
how this would work is that yellow, ideally work so they could get to that level, but that yellow more or less, they would end up being the discontinued once they go into these areas, like that part of those students.
So when we're looking at, let's look first at letter names. So the 62% that dropped to 61% are the students who are well below where this assessment says they should be in that one skill at mid-year. The students in yellow are a little bit below, so we're going to give them a little push to catch them up. And the students in green or blue, they're doing fine. Letter names doesn't have blue because there are 26 letter names. Or if you do capital and lowercase, that's double. But it's finite. You're not going to go above. On the ones on the right where it started with all yellow and then moved to red, by mid-year, we're saying, ooh, these yellow students, some of them didn't catch up. And now they're below or well below because you've had some time to not only work with them to catch up, but to teach them these skills, at least beginning. And so what we want to see is that the red decreases and the green and the blue increase, similar to what we look at in iReady. And when I'm looking at these in general, it's happening for letter names, phonemic awareness. For decoding and word reading, it's weird because you're looking at yellow and then red, but we do see that like the yellow is bigger and the green, oh no, it's not, it's smaller, yellow, green, blue. So those students, it's still showing a lot of students who need support with that decoding practice.
Letter sound, we made some improvement for students who were in the red. Does it make sense?
Doesn't, it's okay. You can.
No.
Yeah, if it doesn't, I can.
Yeah.
Someone I'm not like completely,
Which part are the one that you're? So
what I'm trying to understand is how, what Sarah brought up, the point that she brought up, like, the focus goal is like the kids that need help with
Yes.
reading, right? And yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to understand is like, okay, wait, this one right here, these are kids that are TK or kinder, and
Kinder.
They're kinder.
there's the factors of that yellow is because they don't know, or whatnot. But how I'm trying to kind of understand, it's like, okay, yes, I see that, oh, okay, beginning of the year, it's this yellow, they're below, oh, now they're considered well below because we've gave them the skills or whatever.
Some teaching.
The teaching of them. But those yellow to me, the way, and like I said, I'm more than likely wrong. Once we come to these like letter sounds and actually wording, like, more than likely this group of students that's coming in with needing more help are gonna be those students that are on the peak,
Yes, who need more support.
need more support.
Mhm.
Now, remember for a grade like kindergarten, Becky had mentioned early on, if a student did or did not go to preschool or daycare that had some instruction in it, what they come in with, or parents who were able to do letter name cards with them, things like that. What a kindergartner is expected to have at the beginning of year, right, is going to be less than what they would be expected mid-year, because there's half a year's worth of, they've been in kinder, they've had the instruction. So on the left, what you see are the most basic, most likely to have had some contact with, right? As a incoming kinder. So the letter names, the phonemic awareness, getting into maybe some letter sounds, but even that one may be a little far out for students who had daycare with a babysitter versus preschool, And so those are the ones, once you start seeing the striped lines at the beginning of the year those are the ones that you're more likely to have students who didn't come in with enough of that for their tests to have continued at beginning of year. But by mid-year, they would have had half a year's worth of instruction in those things. So then when you come over here to the decoding, and remember, decoding is the nonsense words. So, but in the similar pattern of words that a kindergartner would learn. So the consonant, vowel, consonant, like cat, dog, right? But a nonsense word like gog, that they're doing that, is going to be most likely not something they're coming in with. So you're not expecting in those categories, right? So they're starting with the yellow because in particular those two, they're not coming in with an expectation, oh, this child should know be able to decode nonsense words. So you see a wide swath of the yellow stripe. It's easier to see on the screen. Or like decoding. So they're tapping out in that yellow. They weren't expected to know much of that. Just the beginning of the year. There's nothing to be below because there wasn't an in particular, those two, right? And then when they get mid-year though, they should have had some experience in that. So that's where you get the transition, because then there is an expectation that they should have some ability with that skill mid-year.
And when
That's why it turns pink.
and when they don't, you're right. We're worried about those students. And when I look back at our CASP data for ELA, I mean, we have overall looking at like our top school, top performing for ELA, I'm looking at math, has 32% of their elementary students who met or exceeded. Luckily, there's the 25% who are nearly met as well, but we still have 44% of students in ELA who, and of course, that's a much broader test and much more difficult. But I think that addressing these students in the red, knowing who they are, what we need to work on with them, is going to help to support their growth.
So like on the decoding where it's yellow with stripes, that test was completed, right? Essentially, that's what happened, right?
Correct.
So, does that make sense? Yeah, they didn't even finish the test.
And it's not striped red because for that skill at beginning of year, there was nothing to be below because there wasn't an
Manual.
expectation
Yeah.
at that point. And so that's also really particular for kinder,
Yeah.
right? And so when they come in for the very first
Yeah.
time with you, or as new skills get added in later grades, especially in those primary years.
Yeah, and the red is, I mean, not good to look at, but I was thinking at least they finished the test
Mhm.
versus like in the first part of the yellow, they couldn't even, they wouldn't even finish the test, right? They had to stop it because they didn't want the child to get
So
frustrated. So, yeah.
I'm looking at word reading and I'm looking at mid-year and the ones who are in the pink stripe. Because that means mid-year, they still weren't getting enough for the test.
To even do the
continue.
test.
And yeah, those are the more
Because
concerning ones.
they were getting enough that the tests were able to continue, but missing enough in the skill set that they're well below. But that 22% mid-year means they weren't getting enough for their test to continue.
And I was just going to add, Cindy, I think if I understood the second part of your question, is part of the way that this is helping us to identify a reading difficulty versus just saying like, okay, this is where the student is so what we're doing, and Becky kind of said to it. So a student showing a challenge area here. So we're looking at, let's go to that 22%. So that 22% in mid-year, we know that they're not developing those skills. Based on this, we're going to provide them with targeted support and intervention related to that area. So we're going to say, okay, you 22%, we're going to really focus on word reading. Probably that 22% is also correlated over here with this 69, 77, and
Who don't
61
know their letter sounds.
right?
Mhm.
So we're going to really provide that targeted support. What we're going to start to see is some of those students in that 22% are going to progress. They're going to move into that pink. That tells us like there's progress that's happening. We're going to see when we look at the end of the year, a percentage of that 22% who are still kind of in that lower end. And those are the kiddos that we're going to really start to focus on, because we know kiddos are going to come in at different spots based on experience, all of those pieces. What we want to see when we're looking at a screener is we're assessing for a specific skill, we're providing an intervention. And if the student is responding to that intervention, that doesn't necessarily give us targeted alarm that there may be a disability. It says they need more support and instruction.
But they're
But when-
progressing.
But they're progressing. But when we see a student, which is going to be a very small percentage, we see a student who is stuck. We've assessed, we've provided support and intervention. We've assessed, we've provided a support and intervention, and yet they're still staying there and they're not responding to that. That's when we're starting to look at, is there something more there? So you're going to have kiddos in all color areas. It's going to happen just naturally. But what the screener does, and again, just kind of putting my RSP, for me, when I was an RSP teacher, what that would start to do is it's going to start to narrow it down for me. And it's going to start to say, it starts to also kind of put this, it's that response to intervention model. Like, it's not just that a student is in that space, but also that they're not responding to those supports and they need something different. And that something different comes in to that specialized academic support that's there.
Sorry. Are the kindergartners taking the skills test, the kindergarten
Mhm.
in Spanish?
We have, we have Spanish available at each of the sites. We had some students who were tested in Spanish. Not a huge number of them did. Was it Miss Toy's class? Well, yeah, for sure Miss Toy's class because she's teaching in Spanish. But there were a few others who were tested in Spanish. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, just this. You got to remember that these kids that are coming in, they're kindergartners.
Mm-hmm.
They're 4 and 5-year-olds. And also, they may not have had any English
Mm-hmm.
at home.
Mm-hmm.
So these are ELL learners.
Mm-hmm.
if I was a teacher and I saw all that red, I wouldn't worry about it now until I get my kids in interventions or
Mhm.
small group. There's different ways of bringing those kids up. I'm now this is the first year that we.
It's the first year of implementation, and that came up in our discussion with the principals on Monday too, is there's a learning curve to administering and to interpreting the data, the instruction that goes between the assessments and the progress monitoring. So it's going to get better and better. So a glance at first grade again, for the most part, we're actually seeing growth in the subtests and the individual measures. Where we saw some little slips are again, letter sounds and decoding. And so those definitely go together. If a student doesn't know their letter sounds, they can't put them together and read a word. And that is a more difficult skill for many students than the actual word reading, because when you see a familiar word, that it's possible you've practiced that word in your decodables. Some students recognize the words. So it's interesting to me to watch these scores. And then here's our second grade data. And again, we're seeing some improvement in 3 of the areas. The reading fluency and the comprehension are areas that we should watch because there's not a significant change, but also we don't know what instruction was provided beyond the regular instruction. Of course, that second grade teachers, they're teaching a lot, but what types of interventions are they?
And the same thing applies where, for example, in the beginning of the year, if they have the kids like score number 7, for the middle of the year, they have to be a score number 13 or
Right.
12 or whatever.
Yeah,
the case
it's
may be. So
a
it's not
moving
the
target.
same standard that they were.
Correct.
Does that make sense, Cindy? Yeah. Okay.
And then at these levels, you see the green stripes, and those students tested out. Oh my gosh, we talked about the green and the blue. Do you remember?
Yes.
I didn't write that down on my notes.
She said that, they reached the caps. The cap.
They reached the cap, but didn't test out.
But didn't test out.
If they tested out, I remember now. They had tested out earlier
Than the.
in the initial beginning of year, and so they didn't take the test anymore, but they're just considered, yep, they've got it, instead of testing above.
That's why the number is.
I'm like, wait a minute, we asked that question.
Did.
Okay. And then this is those composite scores. I didn't break them down for grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 because we got a good taste of that for K2. So this is looking at all the measures combined for those grade levels. And as I continue, something that our principals shared in our leadership training on Monday is that teachers expressed they felt more confident with this recent middle of year test than they did with the beginning of the year test. So there is potentially some variability or inaccuracy with the beginning of year data compared to middle of year, which makes sense. You administer it the first time, you're more likely to make some mistakes. And they want, probably not everybody, but some really want some more training and practice. And so we're going to look at how we can provide some optional PD, or if a whole grade level at a school site wants some, can we get them some sub-release time to do that training and practice and calibration, and some school-wide PLC time to talk more about it and provide support to teachers. And then at our last meeting, we talked about the difference between DIBELS and iReady, and we've touched on this a little bit today. But iReady is that broad diagnostic that's covering the big domains in both ELA and math. And it's measuring the entire year's standards at all 3 benchmarks. So the target's not moving, we're watching the students move at that one target level. Versus DIBELS, where it's really connected to foundational literacy skills. We say early, but I know that we have students in our upper grades up to 6th grade who are still lacking some phonological awareness. And so it's looking at those specific skills and determining what are those foundational skill gaps. The measures are 1 minute each. So when we saw that kindergarten with 5 different measures, those are it's 5 minutes of testing time. There's more time, of course, because you're explaining to students what they're doing and calling student, but they're quick assessments versus iReady, which students are taking about 2 weeks to complete for ELA, a week for ELA, a week for math, sometimes up to a week and a half each for their designated time that they're spending on that. And I wrote some more notes. What our focus on with iReady diagnostics, one is looking at some of the broader instructional decisions we need to make around those domains. And it sets up their My Path so that students can work at their individual level on iReady lessons that are going to help support bringing them up in their grade level. For DIBELS, once we have the data and once our system is firmly in place, we're going to be identifying the students in red and how those students are going to be given the support they need right away in mini lessons with their teacher or the para that works alongside the teacher in the classroom, with progress monitoring on the specific skill they're targeting every 2 weeks. It's again a 1 minute assessment in that one skill that you're testing or teaching, but we want it to be frequent so that if a student is making the progress, then we're going to adjust and take them out of that intervention. They're good, and we're moving, continuing with the ones who aren't. And those are the ones that we're eventually going to look at for additional services through cost. So the way that I was thinking about the difference between the two, I shared this with Melissa. I was like, this makes sense, right? So I recently had like my well woman check as a 50-year-old woman who needed to have, once a year checkup. And over like the last 5 years, at this stage of my life, I've gained quite a bit of weight. All of a sudden, just recently now, my blood pressure's up, my cholesterol's up, and a number of other things are problems. And so my doctor and I are talking about, she sends me for the blood work panel because she's like, let's look at everything. That's where we got the cholesterol. And then she said, I want you to monitor your blood pressure for 2 weeks. And then let's talk about your diet and, nutrition, exercise, because clearly what you've been eating for the last 30 years of your life aren't working for your body anymore. So she gives me these prescriptions, right? These things that I'm going to do, and I'm responsible for taking my blood pressure. It was daily. Now I've been reduced to twice a week. Progress. We know that because I did it daily as she instructed me. So that blood pressure check is like that progress monitoring every 2 weeks for DIBELS. We're targeting one specific goal, we're applying a treatment, we're checking on it, and then we may, when I lose that weight back and I'm back to my healthy size, then we may be able to take that out of the picture. I don't need it anymore. Versus the blood work that we're not going to do every time I go back to visit, because I'm visiting like once a month right now, because she basically told me I was a walking stroke risk. But the blood work will be revisited like every 6 months, she said, until we make sure that all these other things get back into the right ranges. And so I'm thinking about, the blood pressure is the DIBELS, the blood work is the iReady diagnostic. They're both important. They tell different parts of the story.
Love that. I love visuals.
Thanks. All right, so this is the last slide of this presentation and key takeaways on our student data. Targeted professional development. We're using that with our math right now, and I'm really excited to see results with that. But also with DIBELS, we want to continue to offer the PD that our teachers are asking for so they feel supported in adding this assessment and instructional tool to their repertoire. a collaborative data review system. As I said, one of the things that stood out in our meeting with the principals Monday is each school and grade level, they're kind of doing what they will with their data after an assessment. They're all doing things, but systematically, we don't have an approach. And so as a district system, that's something Melanie and I are working on moving into that MTSS protocols as our last. We've been working on a refinement of those. And how do we really provide clarity for our teachers and our principals on how we respond to both DIBELS data, iReady data throughout the school year, knowing those big tests that are once a year, they're one piece of that picture, but they're not the ones we're focusing on. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now I appreciate the presentation. I understand a lot more, so which is
Me too.
good. And also the process as a district of teachers we take whenever we bring in a new testing way, and then there's also obviously the tester learning how to use it and the year, and obviously they're going to get better at administrating it and kind of understanding the results and stuff. So I do appreciate, and I plan to read to my daughter a lot more now.
Yes.
That was a good motivation.
Letter sound cards.
Yeah.
Are great.
Look this up, look
Even just, this is unsolicited parenting advice that we could all offer. As a former kindergarten teacher, singing songs when you're out, pointing out different words and building up that vocabulary, all of those things have such a huge impact.
Yeah, lately, before we just read it, and now every so often I'll say the word and I ask her to repeat it.
Mhm.
So it's like,
Yeah,
that helps with
those-
the pronunciation quite a bit.
Yeah,
And
those are the things.
That would be Spanish.
No, my wife does Spanish.
Okay. Everybody has a job.
Yeah, because she'll tell me like Spanish. I'm like, no, you got it, honey.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to be the person that says like, no, I'm not excited about this. I'm not supporting what you're doing as a board member, and I'm just going to be really honest. Even imagine it's a 5-minute assessment, but assume double that, like 10 minutes per kid, 24 kids in a class, you're talking about 4 hours per assessment time. And I'm going to pull third grade as just something that's a composite score. If it's identifying, beginning of the year, 50% of the students are in red, that's very different from like the conversation that I had with my TOSA about my students, where it was like, hey, we've identified 5 kids out of your 24 that are not on an IEP that tested significantly different than other people. Let's have a conversation about those 5 kids and then set up interventions for them. Whenever there's something that's labeling a lot of people in red, it's as if you didn't do the assessment, because everybody needs help is the same as nobody needs help. So I am so excited if all the teachers are really feeling like this is improving their practice or doing something personal for them. If I was your employee rather than a board member, I would be, why are you wasting my time?
Yeah. And I'm going to say they probably aren't excited yet because we really haven't supported them with what to do with it. For them to be able to say, oh, I did something that made a positive impact on a student. That's what makes a teacher happy, is knowing that they have efficacy and power in improving student outcomes. So we'll work towards that and we'll keep you posted. And I do understand your perspective.
And isn't this something that the state wanted us to do to?
This was one of the 4 options, and Sarah's saying,
Gonna say it
yeah.
was option.
Sarah's saying the option that her district chose is giving very different types of information. Mhm.
I just want to say, because, I think that our board is unique because we do have board members that are educators. So sometimes I'm like, a deer hit me with like, wait, and then, I hear Sarah like go into and dive, or, Alva like go, and I'm like, oh, okay. So, but yeah, it is alarming. As a parent, the reason why I even got into all of this, was because I went to this district. My girls are in this district. So of course my parent had to like, oh my God, right? Like you see that, but you don't know, right? So you don't know everything that goes, like when I would hear these ladies be like, I'm not worried about those numbers. I'm like, you're not worried about that, because we don't know all the ins and outs. But I mean, of course, like she's at a different district, she has something else, and like that's awesome to know that there is maybe, if it doesn't work out, like we could always look at other options. But one of my big concerns has always been the reading, and also the students with disabilities. And that's the one thing that I wanted to touch on. So I know that that's like a hard one. I know it's like, like I don't even know where to begin, how to grasp the data and all of that, right? But what came to mind, and you guys kind of spoke about it, equality and equity, right? Like everybody, we want them to all be equal, but sometimes being equal to you is not what I need.
They need
You know what I
different
mean?
things.
So it's going to be, my needing is going to be different than yours, and how you guys mentioned in those, like, well, we test, we see, okay, we support, test again, no change. Okay, maybe there's another issue, right? But to me, I found interesting with those two numbers, because it's the same amount of students with the disabilities, the number of students on there. And well, I don't know if this was like an overall, the first one, the subgroup, but then in the mathematic, it was broken down, and
Want to go back on the slide?
yeah, I think it was like the first one, where it was like subgroup.
ELA or math?
Yeah,
ELA, I think. The one.
yeah. One before.
That one.
So yeah, that one. So the students with disabilities there, like, they just maintain like 1.4 points, right? They're the 133.6 below standard. The number of students the same. But then when you go and the next slide to the math one, that they have increased by a 5.3, right? So to me, that like was like, whoa. And you think about, once again, right? Like there's different needs, like kids that
Yes.
are in this might thrive in a certain way than, comprehending numbers might be there. Like it's just a whole different world. My thing is like, what I know we're doing what we can as a district, but how can we help or improve or make sure that parents know, like, hey, yes, there's a big concept that these numbers are just tell a little story of it, right? But when we don't know the whole story, we see this and this is alarming, right? And so how are we going to make sure that our students that are in that category, obviously they have the support, but what can we do to get this number that's in red also there, like have that, balance.
And Cindy, I was going to add, kind of when we're looking at the reading piece again, for me, part of the reason that the state mandated that everybody implement a reading screener is because, so as a resource teacher, one of the most challenging populations for me is I would have a student who would qualify for an IEP under one of the areas of literacy, reading, fluency, whatever. And I would be doing the amazing work I did as a resource specialist, right?
Sure you did.
And the kiddo was not progressing. Like I just wasn't seeing the progress. Similar to what you said, I saw another kiddo, same scores initially on assessment, getting the same intervention, and they were really progressing. And what I would say 99.9% of the time would come about is that the student that wasn't progressing did eventually, because we don't diagnose dyslexia, right? But would eventually be diagnosed with dyslexia. And it's because the way that we intervene at a school level with a reading difficulty versus the way that we support students with dyslexia are different. And so I would have a student, or I'd have a student who had an outside diagnosis of dyslexia. They would come to my RSP classroom and they weren't making progress because I'm not trained as a resource teacher to support students with dyslexia. It's a different skill set. So what the state is starting to see is we really need to identify these students earlier so that we're giving them the intervention related to their disability and not generalizing them into this pot of kiddos with an IEP with a reading disorder, right? And so, I mean, I could get through a year and I would see a student not making progress, and almost always I knew like I'm missing a piece of this. Now, we work to support special ed teachers with the skills that are used to support dyslexia. Some of them like are very basic, like a colored reading strip, right? Like there's some little pieces that we can do. But again, just like if I have a student who has a language disorder impacts a student's ability to hear and produce sounds. So that student may also have a reading disorder, but the intervention I'm providing for them in the area of literacy may not be as effective because the primary disability is in speech and language, right? So you have to partner those skills together. So when we're talking about this reading screener that's really identifying students who may be dyslexic, we don't identify, but we're saying, okay, there's a reading difficulty. We're intervening either in the general education area or in the special education area, and the student still isn't making progress. It just gives us kind of more of this idea so that we can make sure that we're targeting the right support to that student. And I think that that's part of why you're seeing a little bit of a difference between math and ELA as well. And it's why the state said we have to identify these kiddos early on. We don't want students to get to 4th and 5th grade receiving special education even and not making adequate progress because we haven't diagnosed correctly what's there. And so I think that it's going to take time, whatever reading screener people are using, it's going to take some time for us to narrow that down. But I think eventually we're going to start to kind of identify those kiddos that are not your traditional specific learning disability reading kiddos and be able to start to give them that supported intervention they need earlier. It's going to take us some time to work through that system, but I think that's a big difference in the two areas. Now, I mean, there also is like dysgraphia, right, which has to do with writing, and dysnumeria, what has to do with numbers. We just don't see it as often. Is it just dysnumeria? Something to that effect, but yeah.
Thank you, Summer, for that explanation. I appreciate it.
Any final questions or comments from the board? No. Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation. No action items. Our next regular board meeting is February 11th, 2026. Any suggested board items? No. Okay, at this time is 7:51. Good discussion enough. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion 4-0.
Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you all.